I'm Ellis Martin, and this is Money Talk Radio. Social anxiety disorder, or SAD, also known as social phobia, affects 30 million Americans. SAD is characterized by intense and persistent fear of social situations, where one may be, in the mind of the individual, scrutinized or judged by others, which indeed may be the case. This fear can lead to significant avoidance of social events, interactions, and social performance situations. Physical symptoms can often include blushing, sweating, trembling, rapid heartbeat, and difficulty concentrating. It can become difficult forming and maintaining social relationships. Depression is also in many cases a partner to social anxiety disorder. Afflicted individuals can and often may turn to alcohol or drugs as a coping mechanism. Additionally, so many Americans are prescribed anti-anxiety drugs or antidepressants as a treatment, which indeed can have negative sexual side effects and or contribute to weight gain. Often, patients opt out of this or any treatment. The Ellis Martin Report and Money Talk Radio has found a promising potential solution with a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company called VistaGen. VistaGen trades on the NASDAQ under the symbol VTGN. That's VTGN. The company is leveraging a deep understanding of nose-to-brain neurocircuitry to develop and commercialize a broad and diverse pipeline of clinical stage product candidates from a new class of intranasal therapies called pharines. It is as simple as a prescribed nasal spray, essentially acting in microseconds, non-addictively, for use ahead of otherwise debilitating social situations. Today we are going to dive into the subject matter and discovery thoroughly with Mr. Shawn Singh. Mr. Singh is the CEO of VistaGen and has served the company in this capacity since 2009. He has over 30 years of experience working with private and public biotechnology, medical device, and pharmaceutical companies, a venture capital firm, and a contract research and development organization, serving in numerous management roles. Shawn, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Al, it's a great pleasure to spend some time with you and your audience. Thank you.
Let's talk about depression, social anxiety disorder. I imagine many people have a degree of this.
Absolutely. Over 30 million adults in the U.S. alone are affected by social anxiety disorder. So it's a highly prevalent indication or disorder affecting a lot of people in their daily lives. Tremendous opportunity cost associated with being affected by the disorder.
Do they know it has a name?
I think so. Certainly. There's a lot of awareness, significant patient advocacy groups like Anxiety and Depression Association, Mental Health America, especially since the pandemic. A silver lining of the pandemic really was increased awareness and destigmatization of mental illness. Obviously, it became a scenario where people needed to talk to people, and it became okay to not be okay. And we saw opportunities for that kind of talk therapy to enhance, right, through online telehealth. Mental health and telehealth have a very strong marriage at this point. So it's very helpful. And yes, we think people feel it and live it, unfortunately, daily. So it's a big factor in their life.
What are some of the symptoms?
So the profound fear, essentially, of an overwhelming fear of being judged or humiliated or embarrassed in what many of us would consider normal, everyday social and performance situations. Simple as answering the door, ordering food, eating alone in a food court, obviously presenting in a team setting at school or in work, going to your neighbors for a barbecue. Situations where people are alone and feel profound stress, or as well in group settings. But the symptoms that will be obvious and affect people, strong symptoms, sweating, trembling, nausea, heart palpitation, shortness of breath, dizziness, these are things that in the midst of these performance and social situations really affect people. They cause them to avoid engagements. They avoid situations where they could build on their professional or personal relationships. And the onset typically is in adolescence, and the mean duration's about 2 decades. So it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and drive away from. It's a really profoundly disruptive disorder in the lives of people who are affected by it.
I would think that something like that could lead to a shot of liquid courage or alcoholism, drug addiction, if you will, which is a huge problem in our society.
Yeah, you're spot on about that. We call them comorbidities, and there's often, unfortunately, a match set between social anxiety disorder and PTSD, SAD we call it, and OCD. MDD, major depressive disorder. So yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, a lot of the current medications fall far short of what people need for various reasons. Either they take a long time to start working, or they don't work in the moment, or they cause significant side effects and safety concerns that are unwanted for folks that have to try to manage this disorder. The thing about social anxiety as well is it's episodic. It's not an all day, every day general anxiety disorder. It's really associated with stressors that people fear, predict, and sometimes are unpredictable, but have really an irrational, if you would think of it that way, response to them, because even when they've got through these stressors in the past, the next time it comes upon them, it's the same sort of flush of sweating, of heart rate, of blood pressure, of things that are really symptomatic of high anxiety in the midst of the stressor. But on other days, when they're not exposed to the stressor, these symptoms don't present. If they're in the middle of a lake fishing or reading a book alone at home, those will be days where medication's not needed. So what's an important aspect of what we're trying to do is allowing people affected by this disorder to tailor to fit the use of a medication that can knock down those kinds of symptoms acutely in the moment as needed. And on days when they don't need it, they don't need a medication in their body. So that's something that's not possible today with the approved medications, especially in the way we're delivering on what we hope will be a brand new class of medications without side effects and safety concerns, similar to what we see today, what your go-to options.
I think PTSD could fall into that category somewhere as well, couldn't it?
It certainly could. Any kind of an acute stress scenario, lots of phobias as well, situations where maybe you're on a plane and here's turbulence coming, or even getting on a plane, engaging in situations or being affected by situations that trigger that kind of acute stress.
So it's not like you have to take a regimented pill every day like Xanax or Paxil, which certainly has sexual side effects, weight side effects, and all these things that give many people pause. They're not medicated at all. Is it something completely different, right?
Well, yes, completely different. There's a powerful synergy between the nose and our brain. So think about how you feel when you smell freshly baked bread, or if you like coffee, freshly brewed coffee, right? Also, how do you feel when you smell a skunk or you're smelling sewage, right? This is a real powerful portal, the nose to the brain. And what we're trying to do is really leverage and harness the power of that very efficient portal to neurocircuitry in the brain that has tremendous power to deliver therapeutic outcomes with the potential that we've seen in multiple studies now to improve lives. So our whole pioneering neuroscience base is anchored in nose to brain neurocircuitry, right? So we are on a mission to, again, harness that power with a new class of potential therapies that is fundamentally different from the current standards of care. Reasons being, these are drug candidates that are intranasal. They rely on rapid activation within milliseconds, 35 milliseconds. When you spray our drug into the nose, we have a set of neurons in our noses that aren't anywhere else. And once we activate them, that activates a stream of neurocircuitry, similar to when you're smelling something and your brain says, hey, great or not so great. It's a different pathway, but it's a sort of a parallel highway using the olfactory system to affect regions of the brain that connect to different therapeutic outcomes. So, for example, we have our lead asset. We call it Fasedienol. It's in phase 3 development. We were the first company to achieve a positive phase 3 study for the acute treatment of social anxiety disorder in a public speaking challenge trial. So we're in the process now. We're trying to replicate that outcome. If we do, then we believe we have what's necessary to apply for a new drug application with the FDA to get approval. What we're trying to do with this drug is to give people a really solid complement to their talk therapy so that when their stressors on them, if they use this drug, Fasedienol, in the way we've seen in well-controlled phase 3 study, it can knock down the symptoms rapidly, acutely, on demand. And the duration of that effect, we think, is about an hour, and allowing people to have the potential to tailor that to fit their stressors. If they know they're going to have a meeting with their boss, if they know they're going to go on a date, or if something unexpected, they have to take the subway instead of an Uber, they have something that can really help them in the moment. And then when they need it again, up to 6 times a day, they can use it again, but not have to worry about some of the things that are associated with a classic oral drug, like a benzodiazepine, like you mentioned, or an injectable drug. Those drugs, they go in your mouth, they've got to go into your gut, your liver, your kidney, your blood. They got to cross over your blood-brain barrier. They've got to land on the right spot in your brain with the right receptor to do the job, but not go where you don't want. So part of the problem with existing medications is there are problems along the way if a drug's got to go through your body and into your brain. Our drugs don't have to do that. What they have to do is rapidly activate that neural circuitry. Because when you have drugs that don't drop on opiate or nicotine or dopamine receptors in our brains, you now don't have a risk of abuse liability that's associated with many drugs like the benzodiazepines you mentioned. If you have a drug that doesn't have to go through your gut, it's not going to bump into other drugs in your liver and have drug-drug interaction issues. So the really remarkable potential of this class of pherines, we call them, is the ability to, again, harness the power of neurocircuitry from the nose to the base of the brain where we have neurons called olfactory bulbs, to regions of the brain that affect your fear and anxiety. We have another drug candidate that affects your body temperature if you're a woman with hot flashes. We have another one that affects potentially the appetite if you're a late-stage cancer patient. So there are different regions of the brain that perform different functions, and turning them on or off is associated with this class of drugs, but without having to drop it through your whole body to achieve that outcome.
Okay, this sounds too good to be true. What's the downside here?
You know, those are the kinds of things you tease out during clinical trials. And so far, we have 5 drug candidates across 6 different disorders that have achieved positive clinical data. And the key for us is to continue to refine that approach, make sure that we have a nice marriage between the kinds of neurons in our nose and the regions of the brain we're trying to affect. So there's a real significant lock and key relationship for each of these drug candidates. And we got to continue to track safety and obviously want to achieve efficacy in controlled clinical trials.
Clearly, I don't think you can use children in these clinical trials, but I imagine at around the age of 13 or so, there'd be a viable amount of candidates.
Our studies per FDA guidelines are all in adult populations at this point. You always want to look at safety. Safety is critical across every human that's associated with the potential use of our drug. We do think there's potential for adolescent use downstream. We haven't studied in that population yet. You first look to ensure that you've got a nice safety profile across adult populations, 18 to even sometimes up to 72 in the elderly population. So we have that in mind. We certainly know the need is tremendous. The pediatric population, even down to age 10, we know is affected by this disorder. Social media is one of the main drivers of the increasing prevalence of this disorder. We also know team orientation in the workplace or in school settings, also major drivers to prevalence. Obviously, the stressors in the world, that often it's social anxiety first and then depression following on. But that match set is troubling. We've seen increases in suicidal ideation, thoughts and behaviors related to suicide, especially among the youth. So there's no doubt there's a mental health crisis. It's not a mystery to anybody. We know there's a tremendous amount of social, economic, political stressors. There's no mystery about that. What the challenge is we really haven't seen anything fundamentally new and different in decades. There hasn't been a new drug approved for social anxiety disorder for over 20 years. And there's never been a drug approved for the acute treatment of social anxiety disorder. And that's what we're focused on. That's our mission. That's where we have one positive phase 3 study already. And we're trying to replicate that outcome because you need 2 for purposes of submitting a new drug application to the FDA.
What is the market for this? Based on the conversation we've been having, I don't know that you can actually put a number on it because it's expansive, but you must have a number.
It's enormous. I mean, again, the number of adults, if we look at the National Health and Wellness Survey, which is, we lean to that quite frequently, the prevalence is increasing. It's increased every year for the last couple of decades, it seems. And certainly the pandemic was unfortunately, that was another stimulus into the number of people affected. But it's big. I mean, it's enormous. Over 30 million people. That's no joke. And unfortunately, what their go-to medications are right now, many people just say, forget it. It's not worth it for me to use the current generation of antidepressants to try to deal with my social anxiety disorder. It takes too long for them to work. And days when I don't need them, I don't want them in my body. I don't want weight gain risk or sexual side effects risk, sedation, things that, again, remember, this is an episodic indication. So not having an antidepressant on board, if all you're trying to knock down is your social anxiety symptoms, they're not going to work in the moment. That's why they're not approved for the acute treatment. So what we're trying to do, again, you have a scenario where within milliseconds with microgram level doses, a typical Advil is 200 milligrams, right? We're talking about 3.2 micrograms. The reason we can do that is they're sprayed directly onto the receptors for the neurons we're trying to activate. And then they go about 300 milliseconds later to right at the base of our brain. There's a relay station essentially called the olfactory bulb neuron. Those then will direct the neurocircuitry to the regions of the brain we're trying to impact. But all of that is done incredibly rapidly, not 6 to 10 weeks like a typical antidepressant will take to work. If you're the lucky 1 out of 3 that will start to work. We have the ability to do this because, again, we're dropping a drug onto exactly where it needs to go in order to start the process to achieve the outcome we're trying to get to. Whether it's menopausal hot flashes, we have a drug in phase 2 development that reduced the number and the severity of hot flashes that women experience. It's a tremendous market right there. Think about the number of women affected in menopause, hot flashes. And our depression drug, similar thing. We're trying to not have to deal with weight gain and the compliance related issues, sexual side effects, cognitive impairment, things that just, again, they disrupt the life as much in many cases or more so than the underlying disorder.
When will this product come to market? Is there an exit strategy? Will it be marketed under the VistaGen brand? I mean, I can ask you 10 more questions related to this.
Again, we're in phase 3 development with the lead asset we call Fasedienol for the acute treatment of social anxiety disorders. We need to be successful in one more clinical trial in the phase 3 program that is undergoing right now. The first study that we hope will read out this year, if it reads out in a positive mode, then we're probably looking at sometime in 2027 if the FDA approves the drug in a normal regulatory pathway. It takes time once the study's done to submit your application, and then you got to wait around sometimes up to a year for the FDA review to be completed. So hopefully, we're in a 2027 timeframe if we're successful in our phase 3 program that's underway right now.
Well, that doesn't seem like it's too far away in the scope of things. It looks like it's fairly close. Let me ask you this final question. Why have you taken the time to chat with us today?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand what our mission is, right? We're delivering an entirely new class of medications. And when you have a new class, sometimes there's acceptance time and awareness that's needed to show, wait a second, things may be much different going forward than anything we've seen as a population over the last couple of decades. And especially given the number of people affected by anxiety, by depression, by menopausal hot flashes, you name it. These are major populations in the United States alone where the current standard of care, at least in our opinion, falls just radically short. So it's nice to know that there may be hope on the horizon. We've seen some solid evidence in what we've been doing, that we're on the right track with the successful study that was completed and announced back in 2023. And trying to just raise awareness is always helpful in all aspects of what companies are trying to do these days when you're drinking water out of a fire hose of things to focus your time on.
Well, Shawn, that's about as good of an answer as I can expect. And thank you very much for spending time with us today. I certainly do appreciate it. I look forward to our next conversation. Cheers.
Thanks a lot, Ellis. I really appreciate that. And likewise, I'm always available and happy to talk. You're doing a great job with you and your audience. Certainly appreciate from our side here.
I've been speaking with Shawn Singh, the CEO of VistaGen, trading on the NASDAQ as VTGN. That's VTGN. If you're considering a promising biotech concern that may indeed contribute significantly to the abatement of the ever-prevalent social anxiety disorder as an addition to your investment portfolio, take a look at VistaGen. Do the research before making any investment decision. Learn more about the company by heading to their website, VistaGen.com. For Money Talk Radio and the Ellis Martin Report, I'm Ellis Martin.